Kael'tharion had seen war across 17 star systems and 400 years of existence. His crystalline form shimmered with captured starlight as his ship descended toward Terminus Prime. Below him, the fortress world bristled with weapons platforms and shield generators. Millions of soldiers from dozens of species gathered for what the Council called the final stand. The Devourers were coming. Everyone knew it. Everyone feared it. He materialized on the landing platform, his energy body taking solid form in a humanoid shell of living crystal. Around him, other warriors arrived. The towering Chromath with their 6 arms and stone skin, the fluid synthesis who could reshape themselves at will. The telepathic mind weavers whose thoughts moved faster than light itself, and then he saw them. Humans. Kael'tharion stopped walking. He stared at the small group of bipedal creatures assembling near the eastern barracks. They wore primitive armor made of metal alloys and synthetic fabrics. They carried chemical propellant weapons that looked like toys compared to plasma cannons and matter disruptors. Their bodies were so fragile, no natural armor, no energy shields, no psionic abilities at all. "Why are they here?" he asked his second-in-command, Velshara. She flickered beside him, her crystalline form pulsing with confusion. The Council summoned all allied species. Apparently humans qualified 3 years ago when they achieved faster-than-light travel. 3 years? Kael'tharion felt something close to amusement. "We have soldiers older than their entire space program." "They insisted on coming," Velshara said. "Something about honor and alliance treaties." Kael'tharion watched a human female directing her troops. She was small, perhaps 1.5 meters tall. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style. She moved with efficiency, but without the grace of evolved species. When she noticed him staring, she met his gaze directly and nodded once before returning to her work. The audacity surprised him. Most lesser species showed deference to the Velthric. Humans apparently had not learned proper respect yet. Over the next 2 days, Kael'tharion prepared his forces and studied the battle plans. The Devourers would arrive soon, tearing through dimensional barriers like paper. They consumed everything: matter, energy, even the very essence of consciousness. Entire civilizations had vanished into their endless hunger. The Council of Eternal Lights had summoned him to their chamber on the second night. He stood before beings who existed as pure thought, their presence filling the vast room with colors that had no names in any language. "Commander Kael'tharion!" The voice resonated through every molecule of his being. "You will hold the northern defensive line. It is the most critical position." "I understand, Eternal Ones. My warriors will not fail." "See that you do not." There was weight in those words. The Devourers have already consumed 12 systems. If they breach our lines here, there will be nothing left to defend. As he left the chamber, he passed the human commander in the corridor. She was studying a data tablet, her face creased with concentration. "You should evacuate your people," Kael'tharion said. The words came out before he could stop them. She looked up, her brown eyes sharp. "Excuse me? This battle is beyond your capabilities. Your species is too young, too fragile. There is no shame in admitting you are not ready." The human smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Captain Sarah Chen, Earth 7th Expeditionary Force. And with respect, Commander, we didn't ask for your assessment. We know what we signed up for." "Do you?" Kael'tharion leaned closer. "I have fought wars longer than your entire civilization has existed. I have seen species far more advanced than yours reduced to cosmic dust. You cannot comprehend what is coming." "Maybe not," Chen said quietly. "But we're here anyway. Funny thing about humans, we show up even when we probably shouldn't." She walked away before he could respond. Kael'tharion felt something unusual: irritation. He had offered wisdom born of centuries, and this child in a soldier's uniform had dismissed him. The alarms came at dawn on the 3rd day. Therion raced to his command position on the northern wall. The sky above Terminus Prime darkened as ships began to materialize. Not ships, he corrected himself. Fragments of ships, pieces of stations, chunks of worlds. The Devourers did not build vessels. They wore the corpses of everything they killed. Millions of them. Billions. The fleet stretched to the horizon and beyond, blotting out the stars. "All forces, prepare for engagement," the Council's voice echoed across every communication channel. "May the light preserve us all." The Devourers attacked in a wave that defied description. They came as a living tide of darkness, consuming light itself as they approached, and before them they sent a psychic scream that pierced every mind in the system. Therion felt it tear through his consciousness like broken glass. Around him, Veltric warriors collapsed, their energy forms flickering wildly. The Mindweavers simply vanished, their consciousness scattered across dimensions. Even the mighty Chromath fell to their knees, clutching their heads and roaring in agony. The psychic wave lasted 30 seconds. When it ended, half of the Allied forces lay incapacitated on the ground. But not the humans. Therion pulled himself upright, his crystalline form cracked and dimmed. He looked toward the human positions and saw them standing exactly as they had been before. They seemed confused by the panic around them, but otherwise unaffected. Of course. Humans had no telepathic abilities. The psychic attack had simply washed over them like water over stone. "Human forces, advance to reinforcement positions," Chen's voice crackled over the communications. "Fill the gaps in the line, move, move, move." And they moved. While species that had evolved beyond physical limitations struggled to recover, these primitive creatures with their chemical weapons ran forward to hold the line. The Devourers crashed into the defensive perimeter like a black ocean. The first wave hit Therion's position with enough force to crack the reinforced walls. His warriors fought desperately, their energy weapons cutting through Devourer flesh. But the enemy kept coming, and worse, they were consuming his soldiers. Therion watched in horror as a Veltric warrior was engulfed by a Devourer mass. The warrior's energy form flickered once, twice, then vanished completely. Not destroyed, not dispersed, erased, gone from existence as if he had never been. Nothing had ever truly killed a Veltric before. They were energy beings. They could reform, reconstitute, transfer their consciousness to new crystals. But the Devourers did not destroy. They consumed. They erased. For the first time in 400 years, Therion understood what mortality meant. The battle raged for 3 days without pause. Species that had evolved beyond the need for sleep began to falter from exhaustion. The defensive line bent and buckled, and through it all, Therion kept noticing the humans. They fought in shifts. Some would sleep while others held the line. They ate rations between firefights. They treated their wounded and mourned their dead, but kept fighting. They were so limited, so fragile, so impossibly mortal, and they would not break. On the third night, as Therion surveyed his depleted forces, he wondered if perhaps the Council had been wiser than he knew. These humans understood something the rest of them had forgotten. They knew how to die. And somehow, that made them harder to kill. The left flank was collapsing. Therion could see it from his command position, could feel it in the desperate communications flooding his channels. A Devourer breach had torn through 3 defensive layers in the span of an hour. 50,000 of them poured through the gap like a festering wound in their lines. His forces were exhausted. The Veltric could maintain energy form indefinitely under normal circumstances. But consuming matter to repair their crystalline shells required resources they no longer had. His warriors were dimming, their light fading with each passing hour. "Reinforcements are 2 hours away," Velshara reported, her voice thin with strain. "The Council is redirecting the synthesis fleet from the southern quadrant." "We will not last 2 hours." Kyle Therian watched the tactical display. The numbers were clear. Mathematics did not lie. That breach will collapse the entire left side within 40 minutes. Once they flank us, the northern line becomes indefensible. Then we retreat, she said. Establish a new perimeter. If we retreat, 15,000 civilians in the southern shelters will be cut off. The devourers will consume them all. They stood in silence, watching their death arrive in real time. The communication channel crackled. Commander Kale Therion, this is Captain Chen. We see the breach on your left flank. Captain, I would advise moving your forces to evacuation positions. The line will not hold. Yeah, we figured. There was a pause. I'm volunteering my battalion to plug that gap. We can buy you the 2 hours you need. Kale Therion felt his form pulse with shock. Captain, there are 50,000 devourers in that breach. You have what? 3,000 soldiers? 3,216, actually. We just got some reinforcements. That is suicide. You cannot possibly hold against those numbers. Another voice joined the channel. A human male with a rough accent. Commander, this is Sergeant Rodriguez. With respect, sir, you don't know what we can do until we try. Kale Therion pulled up Chen's battalion composition. 3,000 humans, no energy shields, no regeneration capabilities. If they died in that breach, they died permanently. No reformation, no resurrection, no second chances. Captain Chen, I cannot authorize this. You are condemning your entire force. You're not authorizing anything, Commander. I'm volunteering. There's a difference. Chen's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. We have 40 minutes to get into position. I suggest we stop arguing and start moving. This is insanity. Welcome to humanity. The channel cut off. Kale Therion stood motionless for several seconds. Then he made a decision that surprised even himself. Velshara, you have command of the northern line. I am going to the breach. Commander, if these humans are insane enough to throw themselves into certain death, the least I can do is witness it. He paused. Besides, honor demands I do not ask others to die alone. He materialized at the breach point 20 minutes later. The humans were already there, setting up positions with practiced efficiency. They worked in teams, some establishing firing lines while others distributed ammunition and medical supplies. They moved like they had done this 1,000 times before. Chen stood at the forward position, studying the approaching devourer mass through primitive optical enhancers. She glanced at Kyle Therion as he approached. Didn't expect to see you here, Commander. I could not let you die alone, he said simply. She smiled at that. A real smile this time, not the cold professional mask. Well, welcome to the party. It's going to be a rough one. A human soldier approached, young with frightened eyes but steady hands. Ma'am, all squads report ready. Demolition charges are set at fallback points 1 through 7. Good work, Corporal. Make sure everyone has their secondary magazines prepped. This is going to be a long fight. Yes, ma'am. The corporal hesitated. Captain, are we really going to die here? Chen looked at the young soldier for a long moment. Honestly, probably. But we're going to take a whole lot of them with us first, and we're going to save 15,000 lives in the process. That's not a bad way to go. The corporal nodded and returned to his squad. Kale Therion watched the exchange with something like wonder. They all knew this was death. They chose it anyway. You sing, he said suddenly, remembering something he had noticed during earlier battles. Your species sings during combat. Some do, Chen confirmed. It helps, reminds us why we fight, reminds us we're not alone. She keyed her battalion channel. All units, this is actual. You know what we're here to do. You know the odds. But I want you to remember something. Every second we hold this line is another second those civilians in the South have to live. Every devourer we kill is one that won't consume someone's home. We are 3,000 against 50,000. And that means those bastards are badly outnumbered. Laughter echoed across the channel. Actual laughter. They were joking in the face of extinction. Make your shots count. Watch your sectors. And for God's sake, somebody start singing. I'm tired of the quiet. A voice rose first, rough and deep. Then another joined. Within seconds, 3,000 humans were singing something ancient and mournful, a song about going home again. The words spoke of death and loss, but also of courage and brotherhood. Kael'tharion felt his crystal form resonate with the sound. It was beautiful and terrible and completely insane. The Devourers hit them like a black tsunami. The first wave crashed into the human lines with enough force to shatter rock. The humans opened fire with everything they had. Chemical propellant weapons that should have been obsolete roared in sustained volleys. Explosive charges detonated in precisely timed sequences. Incendiary rounds set Devourer flesh ablaze, and the humans held. Kael'tharion fought beside them, his energy blasts cutting through Devourer masses. But he found himself watching the humans more than the enemy. A soldier to his left took a Devourer blade through the shoulder, screamed, and kept firing with her other arm. Another had his leg shattered by debris, but dragged himself to cover and continued throwing grenades from his prone position. They were breaking. Their bodies were failing, but they refused to stop. Sergeant Rodriguez appeared at his side, face covered in blood from a head wound. "Commander, we need to fall back to Point 3. We're being flanked on the right." They retreated in stages, each fallback position pre-planned and prepared. The humans moved like a living organism, covering each other with disciplined fire. Those too wounded to walk were carried. The dead were left behind, but not forgotten. Someone was calling out names, keeping count of the fallen. At the second hour, reinforcements arrived. The synthesis fleet appeared overhead, their ships opening fire on the Devourer mass. The breach was contained. Of Chen's 3,216 soldiers, 598 survived. They had held for 4 hours against impossible odds. The Devourers left 30,000 corpses in that breach. Kael'tharion found Chen in a medical station, her arm in a makeshift sling, burns covering one side of her face. She was refusing treatment until her soldiers had been seen first. "You held," he said. It was all he could think to say. "We held," she confirmed. "Lost a lot of good people, though." "Captain Chen, I need to understand something. How did you do this? Your species has no enhanced abilities. No regeneration, no immortality. You should not have been able to hold that breach." Chen looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. "Commander, that's exactly why we held. We don't get second chances. We don't respawn or regenerate. When we die, we're gone. So every second matters. Every bullet is precious. Every moment of life is something we can't afford to waste." She stood up, wincing at the pain. "You've lived for 400 years. You've probably stopped counting the days, right? You have time to waste. We don't. Every single one of my soldiers knew they were probably going to die in that breach, and they fought like it was the last thing they would ever do. Because it was." A human medic tried to lead her to a treatment bed. She waved him off. "I'm fine. Check on Rodriguez." He took a bad hit. Kael'tharion watched her walk away, limping but unbowed. For the first time in his long existence, he felt something he had not experienced in centuries. He felt small. Day 7 of the siege brought a disturbing realization. The Devourers were learning. Kael'tharion stood in the command center, watching tactical displays with growing dread. Every strategy the Allied forces employed, the Devourers countered within hours. The Council's brilliant minds worked in perfect harmony, calculating optimal responses, but it made no difference. The enemy adapted faster than they could plan. "They are reading our patterns." Lord Azothran's presence filled the chamber. The eldest council member rarely manifested physically, but desperation drove him to material form. Every formation, every tactic, every maneuver. They learn and evolve in real time. Then we must be unpredictable, suggested General Krath of the Chromath. We are beings of logic and reason, Azoth-Ran replied. Unpredictability is inefficient. It goes against everything we have evolved to become. Then perhaps, a voice said from the doorway, you need someone who never evolved that far in the first place. Captain Chen walked into the chamber. Her arm was still bandaged, her face bearing fresh scars from the breach. She should not have been here. This was a meeting of commanders, and humans barely qualified as a military power. Captain Chen, Kale Therian said carefully, this is a strategic council session. I know. That's why I'm here. She approached the central display, studying the battle patterns. I've been watching the Devourers for 7 days now. They're smart. Really smart. They learn from every engagement, adapt to every strategy. You fight with precision, and they match your precision. You fight with logic, and they counter your logic. Your point? Azoth-Ran's voice held a note of impatience. My point is that you're playing their game. They're better at being efficient than you are, so stop being efficient. Silence filled the chamber. The idea was so alien that it took several seconds for anyone to process it. You are suggesting we fight inefficiently? General Krath sounded offended. I'm suggesting you fight chaotically. Humans call it asymmetric warfare. You do things that don't make tactical sense. You act unpredictably. You make decisions that even you can't fully explain because they're based on intuition, not calculation. This is madness, Velshara said. Chen shrugged. Maybe, but we're losing the sane way. Might as well try crazy. She pulled up a data file. I've prepared a proposal. Let human commanders coordinate fleet movements for the next engagement. We'll intentionally break patterns, use random tactics, limit communication so even we don't know what everyone else is doing. You want to command our fleet? Azoth-Ran sounded incredulous. Your species barely has interstellar capability. I want to confuse the enemy. If we confuse ourselves in the process, that's a feature, not a bug. The council deliberated for hours. Finally, out of desperation rather than wisdom, they agreed to a trial. One battle coordinated using human doctrine. It was a disaster, and somehow it worked. Ships broke formation randomly. Attack patterns became deliberately unpredictable. Squadrons received contradictory orders and had to improvise solutions. From an outside perspective, it looked like complete chaos. The Devourers floundered. For the first time since the siege began, they failed to adapt quickly enough. They had learned to counter logic and precision. They had no framework for countering madness. The Allied forces won their first major engagement. 3 days later, Kale Therian found himself assigned to a human strike team for a deep insertion mission behind enemy lines. The objective was simple: infiltrate a Devourer command nexus and plant tracking beacons for an orbital strike. Simple. Not easy. The team consisted of 6 humans and himself. Chen led them personally. The others were specialists. Rodriguez, the medic, Jackson, an engineer from somewhere called Texas, Kim, a weapons expert, Okonkwo, a scout, and twins named Pavel and Petra who spoke very little but moved like shadows. They infiltrated the Devourer ship through a damaged section of its organic hull. The interior was wrong in every way that mattered. Geometry that hurt to look at, temperatures that fluctuated wildly, gravity that pulled in directions that should not exist. This place is messing with my sensors, Kale Therian said. His crystalline form flickered with interference. Yeah, it's pretty messed up, Jackson agreed cheerfully. He was chewing something called gum, which apparently helped humans think. Just stay close and try not to look at the walls too long. They do weird things to your head. They moved through corridors made of consumed ships and digested worlds. The mission plan lasted exactly 8 minutes before everything went wrong. A Devourer patrol appeared from a direction that should not have existed. The carefully planned infiltration route collapsed. They were trapped in a chamber with hostiles closing in from 3 sides. Suggestions? Chen asked calmly, as if they were not about to die. Ventilation shaft, Pavel said, pointing upward. That leads to the waste processing sector, Petra added. How do you know that? Kale Therian asked. The twins shrugged in unison. Just a feeling. They went up through the ventilation shaft. It did lead to waste processing. It also led through the waste itself. Kale Therian, who had never experienced true disgust in his centuries of existence, learned what it meant to be revolted. This is your plan? He gasped. Crawling through excrement? Hey, sometimes the shit path is the safe path, Rodriguez said. He sounded like he was trying not to laugh. They emerged in an auxiliary control chamber covered in substances Kale Therian did not want to identify. Jackson immediately began examining the alien technology. This is Devourer tech, Kale Therian said. You cannot possibly understand it. Watch me. Jackson pulled out a roll of silver adhesive tape and some wire. Within 5 minutes, he had jerry-rigged an interface between his portable computer and the Devourer systems. Okay, I'm in. Kind of. It's like trying to read a book while drunk, and the book is also drunk. But I'm getting data. That should be impossible, Kale Therian stated. Yeah, probably. Good thing I'm not smart enough to know that. The data Jackson extracted was staggering. The Devourers kept records of everything they consumed. Entire civilizations compressed into crystalline memory storage, and buried in those records they found something that changed everything. Files marked with symbols that predated all known galactic languages. Records of a war fought 100,000 years ago. The enemy in that ancient conflict was labeled only as the Persistent Ones. Chen activated a recording. Holographic images filled the chamber. Creatures that looked almost human, but not quite. Stronger, faster, more brutal. They fought with primitive weapons against enemies with godlike technology, and they were winning. The recording showed planets burning, fleets shattered, civilizations that thought themselves invincible brought to their knees. The Persistent Ones did not have advanced technology. They had something worse. They had absolute refusal to stop fighting. Is that? Rodriguez started. Our ancestors, Chen finished. Before we became fully human, before something changed us. The recordings showed a war that nearly destroyed the galaxy. The Persistent Ones conquered system after system, not through superior technology, but through sheer unstoppable will. They lost 9 soldiers for every 1 enemy they killed. They lost entire worlds. They lost billions of their own kind. They won anyway. The war ended not with the Persistent Ones' defeat, but with a truce. The ancient powers agreed to withdraw if the Persistent Ones would stop expanding. And then something happened. The records were unclear, but the Persistent Ones suddenly regressed. They became less aggressive, less unified. They fragmented into tribes and forgot their conquered worlds. Someone sabotaged our evolution, Chen said quietly. Someone was afraid of what we might become. An alarm shrieked through the ship. Their presence had been detected. Devourer forces converged on their position. Time to go, Okonkwo said, already moving toward an exit. They fought their way out through corridors that shifted and changed. Kim set explosive charges that bought them precious seconds. The twins moved like dancers, their weapons firing in perfect synchronization. Rodriguez dragged Kale Therian when a Devourer blade breached his energy matrix, the medic's crude techniques somehow stabilizing an injury that should have killed him. They escaped on a stolen Devourer shuttle that Jackson hotwired using tape and intuition. As they limped back to Terminus Prime, Kale Therian processed what they had learned. Humans were not weak newcomers to the galaxy. They were the descendants of something that had nearly conquered it. something so dangerous that the ancient powers had to cripple them to survive. "Captain Chen," he said as they approached the Allied fleet, "the Council knows about this. They must. They know what humanity was." "Yeah," Chen said. "I figured that out a while ago. Question is, what are they going to do about what we're becoming?" The answer came sooner than expected. As their shuttle docked, a priority message arrived from the Council. The Devourers had sent a communication, an offer, a bargain. "Release the humans to us, and we will withdraw from this galaxy. We remember the persistent ones. We do not wish to face their descendants." The Council was considering it. The Council chamber felt colder than the void of space. Kale Therion stood among the gathered commanders as Lord Azothran presented the Devourer offer. Around him, representatives from every major species listened in stunned silence. "They fear the humans," Azothran explained, his ancient voice resonating through the chamber. "After 100,000 years, they still remember. They offer us peace in exchange for one species. 3 million humans across all our worlds, traded for 12 trillion lives saved." "That is genocide," Kale Therion said. The words came out sharper than he intended. "It is mathematics," Azothran replied. 3 million versus 12 trillion. The equation is simple. "The equation is cowardice." Kale Therion felt his crystalline form pulse with anger. "We are discussing the wholesale slaughter of our allies to save ourselves." "We are discussing survival," General Krath rumbled. "I hold no love for the decision, but Commander Kyle Therion, be reasonable. Humanity is one species, one young species. The Devourers threaten everything." "Because we made them threaten everything," a new voice said. Lord Azothran turned toward Kale Therion. "You know. I discovered records in the Devourer archive. Records of the persistent ones. Records of what you did to humanity's ancestors." The chamber erupted in confused voices. Azothran raised a hand for silence. "Very well. You deserve the truth." His form shifted, showing images from ancient times. 100,000 years ago, humanity's predecessors nearly destroyed galactic civilization. They were unstoppable. Every species they encountered either submitted or died. We tried to fight them. We failed. The images showed battles that defied belief. Primitive creatures with simple weapons overwhelming armies equipped with technology that could reshape matter itself. They had no telepathy, so our psychic attacks meant nothing. They had no immortality, so they fought like every moment was their last. They had no logic, so our strategies could not predict them. They were everything we were not, and that made them unbeatable. "So you sabotaged their evolution," Kale Therion said. "We introduced genetic modifications through their food supply. Nothing cruel, nothing painful. We simply limited their aggression, shortened their lifespans, fragmented their unity. We made them forget who they were. It was the only way to survive them." "And now they remember," Velshara whispered. "No," Azothran corrected. "They do not remember. But the core remains, that terrible persistence, that refusal to accept defeat. It was never truly gone, just sleeping, and we have awakened it by bringing them to war." The vote was called. 23 species voted to surrender the humans to the Devourers. 4 voted against. Kale Therion was the only non-human among the dissenters. The decision was made. Humanity would be handed over within 48 hours. Kale Therion found Chen on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. She turned as he approached, and he saw she already knew. "How did you hear?" he asked. "Rodriguez has friends in communications. Word travels fast." She turned back to the window. 23-4. Not bad odds. Really, we've faced worse. Captain, I voted against this. I want you to know that. I appreciate it, Commander. I really do. She smiled sadly. For what it's worth, I understand their logic. It's cold, but it's sound. Trade 3 million for 12 trillion. Any calculator would make that deal. You are taking this remarkably well. Oh, I'm furious, Chen said, her voice hardening. I'm absolutely enraged, but fury is useless without direction, so I'm channeling it into something productive. Which is? A plan. She pulled up a tactical display on her portable device. The Devourer mothership is positioned at coordinates 447-229-881. It's their command nexus. Every Devourer in this system is connected to it. Destroy it, and the entire fleet becomes uncoordinated. Captain, that ship is 300 kilometers long. It is surrounded by millions of escort vessels. Every major assault against it has failed. That's because everyone tried to survive the assault. I'm planning something different. She met his eyes. I'm planning to die, and take that mothership with me. Over the next 24 hours, Chen gathered every human soldier on Terminus Prime, 30,000 in total. She explained the situation with brutal honesty. The council had voted to hand them over to the Devourers. They would be consumed, erased from existence completely. But, she said, standing before them in the massive assembly hall, we have another option. We can attack the Devourer mothership. It is a suicide mission. No one will survive. But if we succeed, we destroy their command structure. We cripple their fleet. We give the galaxy a chance to fight back. Silence filled the hall. Then a voice called out, Do we get to kill a lot of them on the way? Chen laughed. Oh, yes, so many of them. Then I'm in, the soldier said. 30,000 voices rose in agreement. Every single human volunteered. Kyle Therian watched from the gallery, his crystalline form pulsing with emotions he could not name. He had commanded armies for 400 years, but he had never seen anything like this. They were choosing death, choosing it gladly, not because they were fanatical or suicidal, but because it meant something. That night he found Rodriguez in the medical bay preparing supplies for the assault. Sergeant, may I ask you something? Sure, Commander. What's up? Why do humans do this? You know you are going to die. You know there is no resurrection, no reformation. When you die, you are simply gone. How can you face that so calmly? Rodriguez sat down, his expression thoughtful. Commander, we've been living with death since the day we were born. Every human knows they're going to die someday. Could be tomorrow, could be in 80 years, but it's coming. We've had our entire evolutionary history to make peace with that. He pulled out a photograph from his pocket. A woman and 2 children smiling at the camera. My family. I'll probably never see them again. That hurts more than I can say. But you know what? I'm going to die anyway, someday, somehow. At least this way, my death means something. I'm saving 12 trillion lives. My kids will grow up in a galaxy that's safe because I was willing to stop it from burning. He looked at Kale Therion directly. You've lived for 400 years, Commander. That's amazing. But has any of it mattered? Have you ever done something that you knew would be the last thing you ever did? Something that cost you everything but was worth it anyway? The words hit Kale Therion like a physical blow. 400 years of existence, and he had never truly risked anything. He had never faced real loss because he had never been able to truly lose. No, he said quietly, I have not. Well, Rodriguez grinned. You've got about 20 hours to fix that. The assault force assembled at dawn. 30,000 humans prepared for their final battle. They checked weapons, shared jokes, wrote last messages home. Some prayed. Some sang. Some simply sat in silence, preparing themselves for the end. Kale Therion approached Chen one last time. Captain, I am coming with you. She looked at him in surprise. Commander, you don't have to do this. The Council's decision doesn't affect you. You can live. Can I? He shook his head. I have existed for 400 years, Captain. But I have not lived. Not like you do. You make every moment matter because you know it might be your last. You fight with everything you have because you have nothing to lose and everything to give. I want to understand that. I want to matter." Chen studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, Commander. Welcome to the human race. Fair warning, membership dues are pretty steep." "What are the dues?" "Everything." The word spread. Other species began to arrive at the human assembly point. Velshara came, bringing 100 Velthric warriors. General Krath appeared with 500 Chromath soldiers. A mind-weaver named Sath-Ora brought her telepathic cadre. One by one, species that had voted to sacrifice humanity now chose to sacrifice themselves instead. By the time they launched, the assault force numbered 50,000, 30,000 humans and 20,000 aliens who finally understood what it meant to fight like you had nothing left to lose. As their ships broke orbit toward the Devourer mothership, Chen opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All forces, this is Captain Sarah Chen. In a few hours, we're going to attack the most dangerous target in this system. None of us are coming back. But we're going to save 12 trillion lives in the process. We're going to show the Devourers and the Council and everyone watching that you don't need to be immortal to be unstoppable. You just need to believe that some things are worth dying for." She paused, then smiled. "Let's go remind them why gods should fear mortals." The fleet accelerated toward their target. Behind them, the Council watched in silence. Ahead of them, the Devourers waited. The Devourer mothership filled the view screen like a vision of the end of all things. 300 kilometers of consumed worlds and dead civilizations shaped into something that defied natural law. Around it, millions of smaller vessels swarmed like insects around a corpse. Kael Therion stood on the bridge of the human flagship Defiant, watching their small fleet approach certain death. 50,000 soldiers against billions of enemies. The mathematics were absurd, the outcome inevitable. And yet, the humans smiled. "All ships, weapons free," Chen's voice echoed across the command channel. "Remember, we're not here to win. We're here to make them regret ever waking us up." The Devourer fleet opened fire first. The void lit up with energy weapons and projectile fire. The Allied assault force plunged into it like a spear into flesh. Ships died by the dozens in the first 30 seconds. But the survivors kept coming. "Breakthrough on Vector 9, Jackson reported from the engineering station. He had been promoted to chief engineer for this mission, a title he would hold for perhaps another 10 minutes. "Clear path to the mothership's outer hull." "All ships follow Defiant," Chen ordered. "Ramming speed." Kael Therion had fought in 17 wars. He had seen brilliant strategies and desperate gambits, but he had never seen anyone deliberately crash their entire fleet into an enemy vessel as an opening move. The human ships screamed toward the mothership at maximum velocity, their point defense systems clearing a path through the Devourer swarm. The impacts were catastrophic. Ships tore through the organic hull, burrowing deep into the mothership's interior. The Defiant crashed through 6 layers before finally coming to rest in a massive chamber that might have once been a cargo hold. "All personnel, disembark and begin assault," Chen ordered calmly, as if she had planned to crash all along. Perhaps she had. They poured out of the broken ships, 50,000 soldiers flooding into the Devourer mothership's interior. The fighting was immediate and brutal. Devourers emerged from the walls themselves, their bodies merging with the ship's organic structure. Kael Therion fought alongside Rodriguez and Kim, his energy blasts carving through enemy masses while the humans provided covering fire. Around them, other species proved their worth. Velshara and her Velthric warriors moved like living lightning. The Chromath simply smashed through everything in their path. Mind-weavers provided telepathic coordination, binding the assault force together. They pushed deeper into the mothership, fighting through corridors that twisted in impossible directions. Casualties mounted by the minute. A human soldier would fall, and 2 more would take his place, dragging the body along so no one would be left behind. A Velthric warrior would be consumed, and her companions would scream fury and fight harder. "The Queen Chamber should be 2 levels down," Chen said, checking her scanner. "That's where the command consciousness resides. Destroy it, and the whole ship becomes uncoordinated." "How do you know this?" Kael'tharian asked, cutting down a devourer that lunged from the ceiling. "Found it in the records Jackson pulled. Devourers are a hive mind, but the Queen is the central processor. Kill her. Kill the network." They fought their way down through chambers that had consumed entire species. The walls were lined with crystalline structures that held memories of dead civilizations. Sometimes the walls screamed with the voices of the consumed. It was worse than any hell Kael'tharian could imagine. At the entrance to the Queen Chamber, they encountered the heaviest resistance yet. Thousands of devourers packed the corridor, a living wall of claws and teeth and consuming darkness. "Jackson, we need a door," Chen said. The engineer pulled out explosives and began placing charges with practiced efficiency. "This is going to be loud." "Loud is good. Loud means they know we're here." The explosion tore through the corridor, creating an opening into the Queen Chamber beyond. The assault force charged through, and Kael'tharian saw something he would remember for the rest of his existence. The Queen was massive, spanning the entire chamber. Her form shifted between dimensions, existing in multiple states simultaneously. She was beautiful and terrible, ancient beyond comprehension, and she was afraid. He could feel it radiating from her. The Queen had consumed thousands of species across millions of years. She had faced armies and fleets and weapons that could crack planets, but she had never faced anything like the humans. They fought with a ferocity born of mortality, with desperation that came from knowing death was real and permanent. "Spread out," Chen ordered. "Plant the charges on the support columns. We've got maybe 5 minutes before her guards arrive." They worked quickly, but the Queen was not passive. Her body lashed out with appendages that phased through armor. Soldiers fell, consumed instantly. Velshara sacrificed herself, holding back a tendril so others could plant explosives. General Krath took a direct hit meant for Rodriguez and dissolved into nothing. The casualties were staggering, but the humans kept working. With 3 minutes left, Jackson reported all charges were armed. They just needed to activate the detonation sequence and get clear. Except there was no getting clear. The chamber had sealed behind them. Millions of devourers surrounded the mothership. Even if they destroyed the Queen, they would never make it out. Chen looked at her remaining forces. 3,000 humans, maybe 500 others. All that remained of 50,000. "Well," she said quietly, "guess we're doing this the hard way." She pulled up a schematic of the ship's core. "The mothership's power reactor is right below us. If we overload it while triggering the charges, we create a dimensional collapse. It will seal the rift the Devourers came through, trap them in this dimension where we can fight them. That would kill everything within 1,000 kilometers, Kael'tharian said. Including us. Including us, Chen agreed. But it would also cripple the Devourer fleet. Give the Council's forces a chance to push them back. Save those 12 trillion lives we talked about." She turned to her remaining soldiers. "I'm not ordering this. I'm asking. Who wants to stay and make sure these charges go off?" Every hand went up. Every single one. "Commander Kael'tharian," Chen said formally, "I'm placing you in command of the evacuation force." "What evacuation force?" "You." She nodded to Jackson and Pavel. "Rig an escape pod. Get the commander clear of the blast radius." "Captain, I refuse." "Commander, that's an order. Someone needs to survive to tell them what happened here. Someone needs to make sure they remember us. That's you." Jackson and Pavel grabbed Kael'tharian before he could protest. They dragged him toward a maintenance shaft while he struggled against them. "This is wrong," he shouted. "I chose to fight with you. I chose to die with you." Chen met his eyes one last time. "And we're grateful. But dying is easy, Commander. Living with what you've seen, carrying our story, making sure we mattered, that's harder. So do us a favor and do the hard thing." They forced him into an escape pod. Jackson hot-wired the launch sequence with his eternal tape and intuition. "Take care of yourself, Commander. Tell my family I love them." The pod launched just as the charges detonated. Kale Therion watched through the pod's viewport as the Devourer mothership tore itself apart. The dimensional collapse created a vortex that consumed everything nearby. The Queen's death scream echoed across psychic frequencies, shattering the coordination of the entire Devourer fleet. Millions of ships suddenly became independent entities, unable to coordinate, unable to adapt. The Allied fleet, led by the Council's remaining forces, swept through them in hours. The Devourers were defeated. The rift was sealed. 12 trillion lives were saved, and 30,000 humans died to make it happen. Kale Therion was the only survivor of the final assault. They found him floating in the escape pod 3 hours later, his crystalline form dim and cracked. He had witnessed the end of everything he thought he understood about courage and sacrifice. The weeks that followed were a blur. The Council was dissolved, its members held accountable for their attempt to sacrifice humanity. A new government formed, democratic and inclusive, with Earth holding an equal voice. The galaxy began to rebuild. But Kale Therion could not move forward. He remained at Terminus Prime, helping to construct the memorial, a simple wall of black stone, 30,000 names carved into its surface. Every human who died in the final assault. Every hero who taught the gods to fear mortality. 5 years later, he stood at that memorial when a small human girl approached. She could not have been more than 6 years old, holding her father's hand. "Mister," she said, looking up at Kale Therion's crystalline form. "Why is this wall here?" He knelt down to her level, his ancient form settling onto the ground. "This wall exists because 30,000 humans taught the galaxy a lesson. They taught us that life is precious because it ends. They taught us that courage means doing the right thing even when it costs everything. They taught gods to fear death again." "Were they heroes?" she asked. Kale Therion looked at the wall, seeing names he knew: Chen, Rodriguez, Jackson, Kim, so many others who fought and laughed and died in the span of a few terrible hours. "They were human," he said, "which is the same thing." The girl seemed satisfied with this answer. She placed a small flower at the base of the wall and walked away with her father. Kale Therion remained, as he had every day for 5 years. He had lived for 400 years before meeting humanity. Now he would live for however long his crystal form lasted, carrying their story, making sure they mattered. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Far away in the cold dark between galaxies, the remnants of the Devourer hive mind whispered to each other. They whispered warnings and promises and absolute certainty about one thing: never again. Never again would they face humans. Never again would they wake the species that weaponized mortality. Never again would they challenge those who fought harder because life was brief, who sacrificed everything because they knew its value, who turned death into victory because they understood it was real. The humans had won, and in their victory they had become legend. Kale Therion stood at the memorial as the sun set over Terminus Prime. He had learned the human custom of tears, though his kind had never needed them before. A single drop of liquid crystal fell from his form and struck the ground. "Thank you," he whispered to the names on the wall. "Thank you for teaching me how to live." The wall stood silent, eternal, remembering. And across the galaxy, humanity continued to exist in their brief, brilliant way, living hard, fighting harder, making every moment matter because they knew, better than any species in the galaxy, that moments were all anyone ever had, and the gods, watching from their high places, remembered to fear them.